So, hi everybody. My name is Mandeep Sablok. I'm one of the internal medicine residents at Honor Health 4 Peaks. Shout out to any other residents that are in the room. And today I'm excited to share a project that's really close to my heart. And it's resident well-being through purpose, a Blue Zones inspired intervention to reduce burnouts. As residents, we're no strangers to burnout. It's everywhere in medicine. But what if we approached it differently? Through the lens of meaning, purpose, and community. That's the story I want to share today. The big why. So let's start with the why. Even though Honor Health residents report burnout rates 4% lower than the national average, which is about 45%, we saw a 4.4% increase in burnout symptoms in the last year. And that was a wake-up call for us. This project was inspired by the Blue Zones, which, if many of you guys already don't know, there's communities around the world where people live longer and happier lives. One of the core principles is purpose, and we wondered, what if we could use that simple principle to buffer burnout in residency? One of the residents I spoke to during this project said after a workshop, it reinforced positive aspects of meaning, and that's the kind of improvements and impact we were aiming for. Okay. So the approach and methods. We approached this in a structured but very resident-driven way. The backbone was the Blue Zone's Power of 9 principles, but we honed in on two. The first one was purpose, and the second one was moai. Moai, which is the Japanese concept of social connection and belonging. We paired that with conservation of resource theory, which frames burnout as what happens when our energy, time, social supports all get depleted. And the idea was to flip that concept. It was to actively build those resources back up through intentional workshops. Every 2 months, we had a purpose workshops during our grand rounds, and that was designed for residents and fellows, and it was co-led by Blue Zones coaches. These weren't just lectures. They were interactive sessions that reflected exercise, group reflections, and peer connections. For measurement, we didn't rely just on one tool. We blended validated instruments, the Mini Z for burnout, the WHO-5 for well-being, and the flourishing measure and the well-being index. We also asked open-ended questions to capture nuance. Our goal was modest but meaningful, and it was ideology to reduce burnout 5 to 10% while strengthening engagement and connection. So the key insights, the feedback gave us 3 key insights. First, the power of reconnection. Residents shared that the workshops reminded them of why they went into medicine. One resident said, it helped me remember why I do what I do and who I do it for. That kind of reframing can be powerful in protecting against burnout. Second, the recognizing of limits. Several pointed out that the purpose workshops can feel like a Band-Aid if deeper systemic challenges like workload, documentation burden, and staffing aren't also addressed. And that's an important reminder that wellness interventions can't replace systemic change, but they can complement it. Third, opportunities for improvement. Residents wanted even more interaction, more structured goal setting with SMART goals, and incorporation of mindfulness and physical activities. In other words, people weren't dismissing the idea completely. They wanted to see it grow and evolve. Implications and impact. So what do these findings mean? For residents, burnout doesn't just cause emotional exhaustion. It impairs patient care, decision-making, and empathy, and even career longevity. When residents feel purpose-driven and supported, they feel more resilient, engaged, and ultimately better clinicians. For residency programs, this peer-led initiative created trust and buy-in. When interventions are resident-driven, they're seen as more authentic and relevant compared to top-down mandates that fosters long-term engagement. And then for the field of medical education, this shows a scalable model by embedding Blue Zone principles And then training programs can move beyond surface level wellness initiatives and instead focus on building structure that sustain meaningful meanings and connections. And then ultimately, this kind of work doesn't just fight burnout, it builds community, resilience, and a culture where people thrive and not just survive. So the call to action in closing is, here's the core takeaway. When residents connect with their sense of purpose, well-being improves, not just for them, but for the patients and teams that they serve on. So I want to challenge you, in your program or your organization, how can you intentionally create space where purpose and connection are cultivated? So this could look like a structured reflection session, peer-led discussion groups, or even weaving purpose and exercise into existing educational structures. I invite you to join this conversation. How could a Blue Zone inspired work approach look in your program, and what would it take to make it real? Thank you, and I am open to ideas and feedback.